Radha, Kunj Bihari Radha. ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय।
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 ओम ज्ञानातिमिरन्दस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन
तस्मै श्री गुरुवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगना रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्ण पदान् सहगना ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कान्त राधाकान्त नमोस्तुते। तप्तकाञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी विश्वभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिने नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे।
हरे कृष्ण।
हरे कृष्ण प्रभु जी।
मैं स्टडी back after a little bit of a break. Weather is warming up. Everybody's getting in the festive prediction mood. So, we've been discussing which chapter? 13. And the title of the chapter?
Nature, enjoyer, and consciousness.
Nature and enjoyer and consciousness. And the reason we have ended up in this material world, which Krishna himself compares to a prison house, is because of one fundamental misunderstanding. And what that misunderstanding is?
We are the independent enjoyers.
We don't know who is the real enjoyer and who is the dependent enjoyer. So Krishna has been giving good details in this chapter. Sometimes we wonder there's a lot of details. But this chapter serves as the foundation for the rest of the Bhagavad Gita, chapters 14 through 17 in particular. So this is kind of the foundational understanding. And so in the recent verses we've been discussing about the soul and the super soul, and how there is two distinct residents within each body, the soul and the super soul, and that one understands that if one is very conversant in this knowledge, then one actually knows what to do. Just like without light in a room, we don't know what to do. We don't know how to enjoy whatever might be in the room. We don't know how to avoid danger that might be in the room. Without the presence of light, we don't know. That's why we say that Krishna is illuminating us. Illuminating meaning giving us knowledge so that we know what to do, and importantly, what? Not to do. Both are equally important in that regard. So Krishna said in the 26th verse that a very efficient and easy way to acquire this knowledge is to hear. Simply by hearing, one can acquire all of this knowledge. Right? So we spoke then about how everything in this world is one of Krishna's energies, either his superior internal energy or his inferior external energy. So everything is connected to Krishna. Everything that we experience in this world ultimately is connected to Krishna. So the conclusion of that knowledge is how we can perform any of our activities always in connection with Krishna. There's actually no separation from him. It is only in our perception. Right? So we'll read the 29th verse today, and probably the 30th as well. And we'll see how one who has some knowledge does not degrade himself, and thus can approach a very elevated position. Okay? So let's read the 29th verse. Someone wants to read the verse?
One who sees the super soul equally present everywhere and every living being does not degrade himself by his mind. Thus he approaches the transcendental destination.
Purport. The living entity, by accepting his material existence, has become situated differently than in his spiritual existence. But if he understands that the Supreme is situated in his Paramatma manifestation everywhere, that is, if one can see the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in every living thing, he does not degrade himself by a destructive mentality, and he therefore gradually advances to the spiritual world. The mind is generally addicted to sense-gratifying processes, but when the mind turns to the Supersoul, one becomes advanced in spiritual understanding.
So, let's see what Krishna is saying here. So one who sees the super soul equally present everywhere, in every living being. Does anybody see the super soul present everywhere? If we did, what things that we currently see in society would not be present?
Suffering.
Suffering, yeah, very important. There would be no suffering. What else would we not see if everybody saw the super soul present in every living entity? Racism. Okay, we see so much discrimination, and what is all discrimination based upon? The body. The body. We judge people, and it's so pervasively conditioned in the minds of everyone that we even unknowingly are discriminatory. We see somebody walking down the street and they look a certain way. What do we all of a sudden do?
Go to the other side of the street. Yeah.
We make judgments. We make assumptions. Right? And it's all based on the body. But one who sees a super soul, you don't see that type of discrimination. What else? What other things in the world would not be present if everybody saw the super soul?
Alter egos.
Huh?
Alter egos.
Alter ego. In what way?
In the sense that it's not that I'm superior to others or others are inferior to me. So there is never that competition that I have to belittle somebody or I have to climb on somebody's shoulders.
So there's so much, trying to, create supremacy. But actually, one who sees actually understands we are all equal. Because we are all part and parcel of that super soul. So very nice. So we would not see this, fighting and conflict that exists for the search for power. Do we see a little bit of conflict for the search for power?
Always.
Right? That's a really good one. What else would not be present?
Violence.
Violence. Why so?
If we would see a super soul in everyone, then we would not be trying to hurt other person, not only through physically, but through our mind, body, words, speech.
Yeah, amazing, right? Like, there'd be no violence in the world. Because who would want to inflict violence upon the super soul? Or even the soul, knowing that it is part and parcel of the super soul. Right? So, if one has love for an individual, they'll naturally have love for their offspring. It's just natural, right? If you love the dog, you're going to love the puppies. in the layman sense, right? So, yeah, there's no violence in this world. What else? Anything else?
Well, violence towards oneself, as he says, does not degrade himself by his mind. So, in the sense, not hurting oneself intentionally for the suffering seen outside.
So much due to mental anguish and challenges, there's tremendous internal suffering that exists in the world, right?
Mental health.
Mental health. Right? Particularly, we've seen this dramatic increase in mental health difficulties during this COVID pandemic. Right? So can we then say that this knowledge is extraordinarily valuable? Because what price would we put on enabling a world in which there is no violence, there is no egos fighting for supremacy, there is no discrimination, there is no suffering, difficulties, both personal and within it? Can't put a price on it. Okay? So when we say this knowledge is transcendental and it's invaluable, it's perfect, we have some context for that. But we have to have the right type of knowledge, right? So Prabhupada opens the purport by this statement: the living entity, by accepting his material existence, has become situated differently than his spiritual existence. What does that mean to you? What does that mean? Yeah.
I think there's a saying, be in this world but not be of this world.
Okay, so be in this world but not of this world. Yeah, that is how the devotee is situated. Okay. What else? What does it mean by accepting his material existence?
making the best of the prison cell that he is in. He has acknowledged that he is in a prison.
So,
Has he acknowledged? No.
Accepting the body from given.
accepting the body
Body,
as the
bodily
given.
concept, basically.
When we say that accepting his material existence and then has become situated differently than his spiritual existence is an important implication of this statement.
Self-sense gratification. You're looking for enjoyment and gratification for my own senses, not for the pleasure of who I supposed to be.
So that is the reason, that is how we have accepted this current material existence, right?
Yeah.
But if I'm accepting this material existence, it has a very important implication.
You're going against your natural tendency, which is of the spirit soul, that we are to be serving and pleasing. So we're going against our nature.
It means, yeah, so, but yes, we have a different nature, right? So when I say I've accepted this material existence, it means I came from some other existence previously, right? So now I've accepted this material existence. So the logical question then would be, I have a material existence and I have a spiritual existence. Then what do we want to know?
Which is my natural existence.
Which is better? Right? Which is better? Real simple. But unfortunately, until we become introspective and start thinking about these things, what assumption do we make? What assumption have we made most of our life? Maybe, and not only this life, many, many lifetimes prior. We've only understood our material existence. We haven't understood that there is an even higher existence. We've just accepted the material existence. Okay? So, Prabhupada is saying the living entity, by accepting his material existence, by definition has been situated differently than his spiritual existence. So that means that they are not one and the same. They are two distinct existences. Right? So, as Prabhuji kind of alluded to, what is the material existence? Is it if I live in Troy, Michigan? Does that make it material existence? Maybe, maybe not. What is material existence?
Identifying with the bodily concepts.
Identifying with body. And the activities are centered exclusively on
Sense gratification.
sense gratification. Trying to eat nicely, sleep nicely, mate nicely, and defend nicely. To the extent my existence is completely defined by that, then I am situated where? Material existence. Notice it doesn't have anything to do with geography. As Prabhuji said, you know, you can be in this world, but wait, you said
Not of this.
no, but not of this world. So it has nothing to do with where one is geographically. It has to do with one's. What does it have to do with? Consciousness. So Krishna is saying here, don't degrade yourself by what? By your. What doesn't he want us to degrade ourselves by?
His mind.
His mind. Okay? So if material existence is centered exclusively on sense gratification, what is the situation of the spiritual existence? What is the?
Gratification of the super soul.
What's that?
Service to the super soul.
Service to the super soul. So you remember how often we say we have two choices. Either I'm going to serve my own senses, or I'm going to serve Krishna's senses. That's it. We have two options. And if I serve my own senses, where will I be?
Here.
Material existence. serve Krishna's senses, I'll be spiritual senses. It's black and white, very distinct. Right? So the understanding of the presence of Krishna everywhere, how does that help one not degrade their mind? What does degrading the mind mean first? Let's start there.
Focus on anything that isn't in service to Krishna.
That's a nice, complete definition, right? Anything that's not in service to Krishna is contamination of the mind. Right?
The senses control the mind.
The senses control the mind. So the mind is always going to be active. There's some artificial means to try to inactivate the mind, but it doesn't work for extended periods of time. You may temporarily try to suppress it, but the mind is active. It's going to have desires. So, what does the spiritualist do with their mind?
Draw it.
Huh?
They withdraw it and they focus on the super
Focus
soul.
only on Krishna.
Focus only on Krishna. They see the super soul everywhere. And so they try to fill the mind with spiritual thoughts, spiritual desires. Instead of trying to empty the mind of material desires, instead one fills the mind with spiritual desires. Right? So how does seeing the super soul everywhere then help one decontaminate the mind?
Allows them to focus on Krishna. They see the super soul everywhere.
If I tell somebody, or we tell somebody, just focus on Krishna, what's the first question we're going to get? Where is he? Right? Where is he? And what will be our answer?
Everywhere.
Everywhere. What? Right? So, is it feasible that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we can be remembering Krishna?
Theoretically, yes.
Yeah. Theoretically, yes. Is it easy? No. But it's because everywhere we look, super soul is present. Right? So by seeing that, one can make progress to detach the mind. And when one sees Krishna everywhere, what is the logical conclusion of one who is so immersed in sense gratification? If I begin to see that Krishna is everywhere, what is my only logical conclusion from that?
He's inside me as well.
What's that?
Krishna's inside me as well.
Krishna's inside of me as well, yes.
He is the ultimate enjoyer.
He's the ultimate enjoyer. Why? Why would we come to that conclusion? Or how do we come to that conclusion, I should say?
Because he's everywhere, every living entity has some component of Krishna. So even if he is trying to satisfy his own oneself with the consciousness of, with the spiritual consciousness, he is trying to satisfy Krishna in a way, directly or indirectly.
Yeah.
So instead of an indirect approach, make a direct approach to satisfy him.
So one then begins to see that everything I'm trying to enjoy in this world
He's the one.
is ultimately coming from Krishna.
Yeah.
I'm not able to independently enjoy anything. And one begins to acknowledge, I am not my own doer. I am not the doer. Right? And it starts to break down that ego. And then the mind can shift, as Prabhupada ends her purport. The mind is generally addicted to sense gratifying processes. So should we just throw out the mind? The mind is very useful, right? How can it be? How can the mind be the greatest of friends?
Well, it's the tool to make intelligent choices, to in service to Krishna. And without that due diligence, it's also your enemy too.
So it's a powerful tool.
When we conquer the mind, it can be a friend.
Right?
When we control the mind, it can be a friend.
When we control the mind, think about how many of us enjoy hearing pastimes of Krishna. Where are those pastimes stored? In our mind. How about enjoying the beautiful sight of Krishna in this Archa Vigraha form? How many enjoy seeing the beautiful deities? Where do we store those images? Experiencing the joy of the festivals and celebrating with the devotees with Krishna. Where do we store those experiences? Imagine if we didn't have a place to keep them, to store them. Our emotional situation would be very challenging. When we're suffering or we can remember back to the sweet things that we enjoy in Krishna consciousness. Right? So the mind is very much a powerful friend of ours if we take it away from being absorbed in sense gratification. As soon as the mind becomes absorbed in serving Krishna, the mind becomes the greatest of friends. Giant industries are situated in trying to tame the mind. Right? Mental health we're struggling. But the means to bring the mind to a very wonderful state is through Krishna consciousness. So by filling the mind with beautiful thoughts, the names, pastimes, forms, and even the associates, one becomes nicely situated in their mind. And thus one will not degrade themselves. So it starts with, understanding everywhere Krishna is present, right? Let's read the next verse, 30th. So let's read that verse.
One who can see that all activities are performed by the body, which is created of material nature, and sees that the self does nothing, actually sees.
Purport.
This body is made by material nature under the direction of the Supersoul, and whatever activities are going on in respect to one's body or not is doing. Whatever one is supposed to do, either for happiness or for distress, one is forced to do because of the bodily constitution. The self, however, is outside all these bodily activities. This body is given according to one's past desires. To fulfill desires, one is given the body, with which he acts accordingly. Practically speaking, the body is a machine designed by the Supreme Lord to fulfill desires. Because of desires, one is put into difficult circumstances to suffer or to enjoy. This transcendental vision of the living entity, when developed, makes one separate from bodily activities. One who has such a vision is an actual seed.
This is the first time we're hearing this topic? Right? We heard this topic all the way back in the second chapter, spoken repeatedly. And the key is that the self is not the doer, nor is the self the body. So we're not this body. We've heard that once or twice before. So, but let's see. The body is made by material nature. That means, does anybody get to create their own body? I like to design it this way. You can create your own emoji, right? You can pick this and that and kind of make your own style, right? But how how is our body determined?
Past karma.
Our past karma, our past desires. And who gives us our body?
Krishna.
Through? Because Krishna directly does not involve. He says, I'm not me. But it is him. Why? Because material nature is there. So how do we say material nature ultimately means Krishna? What is the material nature?
It's external potency.
The potency of Krishna. And under whose jurisdiction is the material nature working? Krishna's. So it's the ultimate doer. But the immediate doer is the material nature. Right? So we give the simple example, like, I want to move my hand. Yeah, I'm moving my hand, am I not? I am not. You all have heard this example so many times. And it's work. Why? How am I not moving my hand?
You have the desire.
What's that?
You have the desire to move your hand.
Okay, I have a desire, and then don't I move it?
It has to be sanctioned.
How does it have to be sanctioned? By who?
By Krishna, the material energy, or material nature.
So how does the hand move then? Is there a string? I don't see a string here.
Body mechanics.
Huh?
Body mechanics.
Body mechanics.
Peripheral nervous system.
Central nervous system. And who's in control of, who's creating that?
Brahma.
Material nature. It's all material nature, right? So the material nature is creating the ability to move my hand. So when I think, I went and I made this piece of pottery. It's mine. I made it with my own hands. What do we have to remember? What was our role in making that piece of pottery? Desire. Who gave the earth? Who gave the water needed? Who gave the ability to move the hand? But it's my pot. Doesn't work. Okay. So one who sees this actually sees. But we see all the society is convinced and thinking, I am the doer. And thus, when I think I am the doer, what do I do with the results?
Try to keep it for myself.
When we say, give the results to Krishna, our immediate reaction is, why? They're mine. Why should I give it to somebody else? But are they ours? Krishna is facilitating every single action. So our body, as we know, is based on our past. So Prabhupada says here, one is forced to do because of bodily constitution. What does that mean?
I mean, I want to fly, but in this status, my body constitution does not allow me to fly. If I'm a bird, then that's a different story.
Yeah. Your body, the type of body you have determines your activities. If you want to lie on the beach, but you're a fish, can you do it? No. If you want to fly in the air, but you're a tree, can you do it? No. Your bodily constitution dictates the activities you can perform. So doesn't that seem unfair?
No.
Why is it not unfair?
Because I've obtained this bodily constitution based on my past desires. So Krishna has fulfilled that.
So who do we have to blame?
Ourselves.
Ourselves. Our past desires and past karma. We have nobody to look at but in the mirror if we're unhappy with our current constitution. So if we're unhappy with our current situation, what do we do about it? Chant. Perfect. Fix it. Perfect. Sit. Simple. Right? Begin to see things as they are. One who can see all activities performed by the body, which is created in material nature, and sees that the self does nothing. Actually see. But it's hard. But by seeing the super soul everywhere, by understanding not everything is but one of Krishna's energies, we begin to detach at least from the fact that I am doing. And sometimes we see the world around us, we still can't contextualize it's Krishna. And Prabhupada gives this wonderful example. If you combine citric acid with this sodium, you combine the two, what do you get? What happens? Huh?
Salt.
You get some bubbles, right? It comes, right? So what's the cause of those bubbles?
Heat release, exothermic reaction.
So some reaction between these two chemicals, right? They can say the cause of those bubbles is the combination of this. But that's not the cause of the bubbles. The cause of the bubble is the chemist who brought the two together. Right? There's a person behind it. We see all this water in the world. It's all hydrogen and oxygen. We know that. But who brought the hydrogen and oxygen together to create the water? So in everything, there's a person that we define as the cause. The cause of those bubbles is not the two materials. Yes, that's the... But somebody had to bring those two together in some contained environment to create that reaction. So all the reactions we see around us in nature, yes, they're there. They're happening by different ingredients. You know, the law of gravity. It's a factual law. But someone has to have created it and managed it. There's a person behind it. So one who begins to see that then has perfect knowledge. So this transcendental vision, Prabhupada says, when developed, what is the conclusion of this transcendental vision? What happens?
We try to nourish the soul rather than the body.
We chant. We see oneself separate from the bodily activities. So sometimes we wonder if these, verses, these chapters, okay, let's get to something new, something different. Until we actually see that we are separate from bodily activities, we should keep reading over and over and over. Because until we are perfectly understood that I am not this body, how clear it should be? It should be this clear. Krishna gives a perfect analogy of how clearly we should see that the soul is separate from the body. He says, one who has knowledge knows that they are living in the city of 9 gates. Right? So this body has 9 gates, 9 holes. So one sees they're living in this. Let's say we live in Detroit, Michigan, just to be general. Anybody living in Detroit, do they ever say, I am Detroit? No, they simply say, I'm living in Detroit. It's clear as day, no? Black and white? Any confusion ever in that? As clear as that is, we should see ourselves living in this body. I am not Detroit. I am not this body. I am simply living in this body as a a means to perform different activities. We should see that distinct of the self. When you're in Detroit, you never think yourself to be Detroit. It's black and white. Krishna gives the perfect way for us to contextualize that. And so that's how clear it should become in our consciousness that we are separated from the bodily activities. As clear it is, you almost laugh. Oh, no one would say I am Detroit. It's true. Well, no one should think I am this body. So until we come to that point, we should keep reading these verses over and over and over again, even through repetition.
I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
So this is very important, and this is, I think, they want to ask when we're told to be careful of like Mayavadi philosophers or like the Mayavadis in short, because this is the important part that's missing. Is that correct? Do I understand?
Yeah, a little bit, but the Mayavadis will accept that, yes, I am not this body also.
Oh.
But they don't understand that who I am, the soul being part and parcel and eternally separated, expansion. So they confuse what is the soul. They know the soul, but they consider the soul to be one with God.
Oh, I understand what you mean.
Instead of being distinct. That is a difference. Mayavadis will also abstain from matter. Matter, I'm not this body, it's not good for me. But they'll not engage in devotional service because they think, no, I am God. Good luck. Any other questions, comments? Yes, sir.
The 30th verse, somewhere in the middle, the self, however, is outside of these bodily activities. What does self refer to out here?
The self?
Yeah.
What do you think? What is the self that's referenced? Good question. The soul.
And why did Srila Prabhupada not categorically mention soul? Because he has used soul and super soul everywhere else. But here, why did he choose to use self rather than soul?
To indicate that we are the soul. The self is the soul. Because we know there's a concept of I am. I don't know who I am. Okay? So when we say self-realization, it's realizing who I am. So and that's the terminology. But they're interchangeable. So, but the key thing here is that, again, the idea of who I am must be established, and it's distinct from the bodily activities. Okay? So what happens to the body does not affect in any way the soul. The soul is always pure. But what we do, the concept of the self in an ignorant state is the body. So I view the self to be the body. Whereas the self, so if Prabhupada says the soul, it still doesn't, it doesn't explain the materialist position. So the materialist position with the spiritual position, they both have a conception of self. But one identifies the self as the body, and one identifies the self as the soul.
So it depends on if you're asking for material, reason or spiritual.
Because my initial perception was that self is that complete package, soul plus body. That is what my initial perception was. So if that is the package, what he's saying is within the package, do not focus on the body, just focus on the soul.
Just the soul. Just as much as you would not consider that jacket you're wearing to be you. You would consider it yours. But you wouldn't consider it to be you. You would consider it to be yours. Right? So if your jacket is lying over there, you would not consider part of you to be over there. You'd consider something of yours to be there.
I agree.
So the body is yours. Not really, it's given by nature, right? But the self doesn't identify any portion of itself with the body. Because the self is complete in and of itself. So just as you possess things, we should view the soul as possessing something. This body. This body is possessed by the soul. Don't take that, you know what I mean by like possessed by ghosts. No, but the body is, you know, I living in this body should be, this is my body that's being used for executing various activities.
Is that what all is encompassed within that term Brahma Pucham? Brahma Pucham, the 5 stages of Brahma realization. He talks about it in the purport of the 5th verse. It's kind of like that understanding of all of that functionality of the body versus, you know what I'm saying?
To some degree, because that the Brahman realization goes to all the way up to also Krishna.
Right, and that goes into Bhagavan realization, right? It's kind of like the final stage of all that.
Yeah, and so the first 3 stages of the 5 steps of realization are related to the body.
Right, and like
The
eating
body
and then
concept.
realizing.
Yes.
Okay, those things.
So those are all related to the bodily concept. But so because still what's incomplete in all of this discussion of the self, which is where the Mayavadi conclusion is, what's the relationship of the self to the Supreme?
Right.
That still has to be added to the equation for it to be complete.
Right.
Right? So this jnana that we're obtaining here is simply to help us understand the importance of detaching from matter. So Prabhupada always is writing in every purport who we are as servant of Krishna. Yes?
So going back to seeing Krishna and everything, like, you know, so we're participating in like service at the temple, right? We have some knowledge of like there's a difference between body and soul, whether I remember it all the time or not, that's another story. But like, so as we're doing service, whether we're like cooking, garland, whatever, archery, whatever we're doing and stuff, like we should see Krishna in each one of those things and not say that, oh, I did this, or you know what I mean? Like if we're making something nice for Krishna and stuff, you know, I brought the ingredients, I got all the bhoga, I made it, it looks really nice, I offered it, this and that. So when you're putting I into all of that, that's not transcendental or devotional service, right? Or I made this, let me, you know, pack it or take things, like we have to kind of start seeing even all of that as Krishna as well too and stuff.
Yeah, so in our practical devotional service, you know, we tend to take possession of our devotional service, or we get possessive of, as you said very nicely, even in devotional realm, I did this, I made this chapati, I made this garland, I made that.
So to purify from all.
But we should recognize 2 things. One, it's irrelevant that I made it. What's relevant is, was Krishna pleased by it? So our mood for the service should be to please Krishna. That's the ingredient in whatever we are offering that he appreciates. He's not appreciating how the flowers are situated on the garland. He cares less. What he cares about is how much love went into situating the flowers on the garland such that he would be pleased. He doesn't care how much salt is in the sabji or how much sugar is in the sweet rice. What he cares is how much love went into making that item for his pleasure. So that's one dimension. But the other dimension that you're alluding to is we should understand that our performance of devotional service is also enabled by Krishna. So we have a very tiny, infinitesimal role to play, but a very important role. So whatever service one is able to do, they should understand who is the enabler of that service. It is only Krishna. So something goes extraordinarily well. Who should get the credit? Krishna. If you do your best and it doesn't go so well, you can also give the credit to Krishna. As long as you're not lazy.
So how to purify so that you become the
Chant. No, we have to do our service in the right consciousness. Right? Consciousness is what's important in our service, not the result. It's the ingredients that go into it that matter, not the result. That has no bearing how beautifully you may sing a bhajan, or how wonderfully you may discuss a pastime, or how beautifully you may make a garland or cook. It is, what is the consciousness of love in trying to please Krishna that went into it? If my mood is, I'm going to do this so I can show that I'm better than this person in this service, how do you think Krishna is going to receive whatever it is that we gave to him? If somebody gives you a gift, and you know the only reason they're giving you a gift is to make somebody else envious, are you going to appreciate that? You're going to feel used. Oh, great. You're using me to make somebody else envious. So how is Krishna going to feel about our service? If my motive for doing the service is not to please him, but it's to make somebody else feel X, Y, or Z. Right? So, just like we don't want to be at the receiving end of anything for any ulterior purpose, Krishna doesn't want to either. But unfortunately for all of us, Krishna's all-knowing. He knows everything. We may not know. Somebody gave us a nice gift. Oh, but there's an ulterior motive. We may not. But Krishna knows. Right? So our mood of service is so important. And we must have this purity of intent. And actually, that's what makes also service the most pleasurable. Because, you know, if things don't go perfectly, then it's okay. Was my mood, was my effort correct? I only have to worry about my effort, my consciousness. Whatever ends up happening, it's okay. Because that's what Krishna is looking at. And so, it's an important point you're making, because sometimes you think, oh, I'm in a temple now, I'm free of the woes. I have perfect consciousness. Oh, these creep into our devotional service as well. Other questions, comments?
Two things that came to my mind while reading these two verses is gratitude and compassion. And we see there's in the 29th verse, see the super soul present everywhere in every living being. The compassion is there, and then the gratitude also manifests. So I just want to make that comment.
Yeah. We have to be gracious, right? If everything we are living on is given by somebody else, we have to have a mood of gratitude. Right? You drive on the roads of the city and the state and the country, you have gratitude through your taxes. You have to show your gratitude. It's a law. Right? But Krishna, he gives us the free will to choose to express that gratitude. Any other questions or comments? Any realizations? Just 2 minutes on. So Wednesday was the appearance day of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. who we know is the spiritual master of Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur was a extraordinary guru in our discipline succession, who really was the first to bring this message of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu out from the holy dhams and into the big cities. And we know he spread this message all over India. And by his unlimited compassion and mercy, he empowered and instructed Srila Prabhupada to bring this message to all of us. And Srila Prabhupada, when you read his purports and you hear his lectures, he speaks about how he is simply a servant of the instruction of his spiritual master. So we are the great beneficiaries of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's mercy, because by his mercy we have come into contact with Srila Prabhupada and the pure teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Lord Krishna himself. And so we have a great deal of, as we said, as Prabhu said, gratitude. We should recognize the significant importance Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is playing in our role of devotional service. And he has so many wonderful qualities and characteristics, being a very ferocious and fearless preacher against this material energy, being very innovative. Many of the things that we see that Srila Prabhupada established, they were the ideas of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur was very, very innovative in his preaching and his ideas for spreading this message. So his appearance day was on Wednesday, this past Wednesday. So just wanted to offer a few comments on that. So anything else before we conclude with Chen? Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.